Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are going to be learning about the water cycle. Now this is something that you probably have talked about before in middle school, but we're going to go just a little bit deeper into it today and throughout this unit, which is on fresh water. So we see this as the water cycle, but we also need to know it specifically as its other name, which is the hydrologic cycle. So the water cycle and the hydrologic cycle are the same thing, and it's just going to talk about the recycling of the water on our planet. So let's take a look at our hydrologic cycle. And the definition of our hydrologic or our water cycle is the movement of water through the atmosphere. So the water on the planet recycles itself and it moves through our atmosphere, which is pretty much above and all around us. 75% of the Earth's surface is actually covered by water, which is a big chunk. Most of our planet is covered by water, whether that's salt water, which are the oceans, or fresh water. Now, Unit 4 specifically deals with fresh water, so we're going to be focusing on fresh water, and then next unit we'll move into our oceans. So most of our water is undrinkable. It's either salty or it's frozen. So the actual percentage of fresh water on our planet is pretty minimal. So how does the water actually get into the water cycle? Well, water rises in one of two ways. The first way is through evaporation. So evaporation is going to be one of the processes we need to know. It's how water gets into the atmosphere. So basically heat from the sun, and the sun is going to be the source of energy that drives this process. Okay, so the source of energy for the hydrologic cycle is going to be the sun. So as that radiation from our sun reaches the planet, it will heat the planet and the water changes from liquid to a gas. So as we see on this animation here, we've got our little H2O, our water molecule, moving from that pond into the atmosphere. So it is evaporating into the atmosphere. Another way is through a process known as transpiration, and we do need to know this word. So transpiration is the evaporation of water from the leaves of plants. Okay. So basically what happens here is plants will release water from their stomata. Okay, so these are the microscopic pores on the underside of leaves. So if you think of yourself as like when you sweat, if you get too hot, your sweat will kind of drip off of you. It's kind of the same thing. So transpiration is kind of the equivalent of sweating for plants. They will release that water and that water will evaporate into the atmosphere. And then this is just kind of a depiction of what that looks like. And there goes the water from the stomata. Again, this is water, which is H2O. So there's 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen being released from the stomata in the plants. So again, we've got water entering the atmosphere in 2 different ways, through transpiration and evaporation. So the other part of the water cycle we need to know about is condensation. So condensation is the changing of water vapor to liquid. Okay, so condensation is going from a water vapor back to a liquid. And typically this happens because of cool temperatures. So if you think of like, especially in the summertime, like early in the morning when it's a little bit cooler and you go outside, there'll be dewdrops on leaves or on the grass. That is from condensation. So the vapor, the gaseous form of water that was in the atmosphere, as it cooled down, it started to condense onto those leaves. And we can see condensation on the outside of bottles, or if you go to a restaurant or even at your home, if you put ice and water in a glass and you sit it on the table, there will be condensation on the outside of that glass. So just little water droplets accumulate. So clouds are actually the effects of condensation. So as water evaporates into the atmosphere, we will get condensation to form our clouds, which will eventually give us rain. So clouds that form in the atmosphere are a direct result of condensation. So after our water is in our atmosphere, it gets up to cooler temperatures, it condenses into clouds, and then eventually our clouds get to the point where they can't really hold any more water, and so we will eventually get precipitation. So this is the falling of water back to the surface of the earth. Okay, so this comes in the form of rain, snow, sleet, hail, and any other form of precipitation. So that's pretty much it. But anytime that the water falls from the atmosphere, from the clouds, back to the surface, that's just precipitation. So precipitation, typically here, because we live in North Carolina, we see rain. Sometimes we see snow, but for the most part, it's rain. And that's just the water, again, coming back from the clouds to the atmosphere or to the ground. So on the ground, there's something called runoff. So the water will run downhill into rivers, lakes, and streams. So if you guys see the animation on the screen, that water is coming down in the form of precipitation. It doesn't all get absorbed into the ground, okay? A lot of times it comes down too fast. It doesn't get completely soaked in. So it will run off. You see the little water molecules running off, running down. It will run off into collection areas. So a collection area is going to be some type of surface water, which we will also talk about in this unit. So some type of, lake, river, etc. There's also a process called infiltration. So in infiltration, if you infiltrate something, you kind of get into it, get between it. So in infiltration, the water is going to soak into the soil and it will collect as groundwater. Also another topic for this unit. So if the water runs off, it will run into surface water, a lake, river, pond, etc. If it's infiltrated, so if we have infiltration, the water is seeping into the ground and will become groundwater. Okay? And this is just an image of what groundwater looks like. So the water would be hitting the top surface of the earth. Again, this would be our crust. And then as that water infiltrates down, it will collect below the surface. And it is known as groundwater. So groundwater when it's collecting beneath the surface. So we have our hydrologic cycle. We can put it all together now. So remember, hydrologic cycle just means the recycling of the water in our plant or on our planet, and it's the water moving through the atmosphere. So we have evaporation and transpiration that puts the water into the atmosphere. So the water leaves the plants and it leaves its source on the ground. It could be from the ocean, from ponds, whatever. So we are leaving, the water is leaving and entering the atmosphere. Then we have condensation, which transforms the water from the liquid into the clouds that we're familiar with. So if you ever see clouds in the sky, that's a direct result from condensation. Then, when those clouds become a little too heavy, oversaturated with water, they will release that water back to the ground in the form of precipitation, which can be rain, snow, sleet, hail. And once it comes back in the form of precipitation, there's one of two things it can do. It can either run off into a surface water source, such as a pond, a river, or a lake, or it can infiltrate into the ground and it can become groundwater. Okay, so this on the screen is the water cycle, aka your hydrologic cycle, which is the name we need to know it by, the hydrologic cycle. Okay, and this is a recycling of water. So the water on our planet is constantly being recycled. If it was not, so like let's say that when the water evaporated and it just like left the planet, we would not be able to survive. We have to have water to live, and without it, we wouldn't be able to to really have life on this planet. So the water is recycled. We have to know the steps, what's happening in each, and how the water gets from point to point. Okay? And again, this is just another kind of depiction of your water cycle, and this is also in your notebook. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, and if not, please make sure that lesson 1 of your Unit 4 notebook is complete.